All right, welcome to the Highly Addictive Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Josh.
And I'm Daniella.
Rooting through our purse for snacks.
Hell yeah, I got snacks.
So tonight we went to the gang went to Smart Recovery.
Hell
To
yeah.
see what it was all about. And so this podcast is going to be relating that experience. What kind of snacks you got over there?
Granola bar.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And relating that experience to, and just kind of what our thoughts and opinions of what the Smart Recovery model is. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to?
Stop buying my snacks.
I will not.
Yeah. No, I liked Smart Recovery. That was my first reaction. Was like I was like, oh, this is cool. I thought it was something. I mean, it's totally different. Like, for those that don't know, like Smart Recovery is basically a non-religious recovery program that basically. Well, Mike has the sheet here.
I have the sheet. I was just signaling like, hey, I got the sheet that probably explains it. It's a abstinence-based program that is built on essentially cognitive behavioral therapy. So they do an open discussion. So there's lots of crosstalk. And they do the I statements, which is kind of doing 12-step programs already.
We do.
You avoid absolutes. You don't give advice, or that's official. Officially, you don't give advice. I felt like I was getting some subtle advice, if not condescension or preaching, from the facilitator, as they call themselves.
Well, we'll get into that because I'm of the belief that
Just fuck that dude. That's all I'm saying.
I'm of the belief that Mike kind of deserved it. Like as we go into.
I did play the role of the troll tonight. That was how it went down. Almost got in a little tilly after the meeting. We can get into that later.
I wish I saw that.
Yeah. Also, before we hop right into our tales of Smart Recovery, Mike has actually been reaching out this week to some potential sponsorships. Also, we've been trying. We've been trying to get what's the hell? Cimatech. Cimatech.
Goddamn money, Cimatech.
We've been trying to get Cimatech for
Cheap
a while now.
Cheap motherfuckers.
That's not a way to get them, man.
We'll see.
This is partially a podcast, but partially a vape ASMR channel as well. So if you like to hear people talking and then also vaping in the background, like I think it's the perfect place for Cimatech to get their money in. And listen to that. And so I just want to say I appreciate you doing that for the podcast here, Mike.
Yeah, and any of you Facebook followers want to chip in some money to help us get some mics?
Yeah, because we want to really build this thing out and get a video format down, and then also just get some better mics because we kind of got some like half decent stuff, but pretty amateur.
Break out your wallets, folks. Come on.
Yeah. Please send it directly to my PayPal account. Link in the description. No, I'm just kidding. But
but not at all.
But not really, yeah. Just hit me in the DMs and we can get an e-transfer set up.
All right. Should we get back into this?
Yes.
And that was our.
I'm just trying to keep the lights on.
That was our begging moment, folks. Okay, so yeah, so basically they kind of started off, and it was interesting because before we started the meeting, I was talking to a guy that we were standing outside with, and then I ended up talking to the facilitator. And their facilitator. For people who are familiar with 12-step programs, the facilitator is essentially the chairperson. What's interesting is that for Smart Recovery, to be a facilitator, you do an online course, he was saying. It's like 40 hours and takes about 3 weeks. You do, and I think they do like a video chat as part of that too. So that's their process of being of chairing the meeting essentially, or facilitating the meeting, is you take a course. Cool. Abstinence is not required to be a facilitator, so you can be actively using drugs and be facilitating if you put the work into. Yeah,
that's odd.
It's an interesting departure for sure.
How does that promote recovery?
I guess what they're saying is that it's about putting in the work and being a good facilitator, and the discussions are what's promoting recovery, not the
I guess
chairperson as an idol.
I guess it's kind of similar. I mean, if you think about it, like in AA, you could go to meetings for like a week and have a week clean and be a chairperson. If you put your hand up and you join the home group.
No, in my home group.
At least in NA you can for the most part. I mean, I've chaired meetings all the time when I had like a month, 2 months clean.
I don't generally look at the chairperson as my model of recovery.
Well, I don't think that the facilitator necessarily was that. They're just kind of there, because like the whole process, like, basically when we went in there, we all went around the circle and did a check-in of like where we're at on the week. There was like one topic on the board, and like the facilitator is basically like a moderator. Like if you've ever watched like a debate or like anything like that, like I don't think he was the model. He definitely has his own opinions and stuff like that, and he's kind of the leader of the group. And obviously this guy had a lot of time, but I think he's there just to keep it on track, right, and to keep it from going off the rails too much, because it's such a like a crosstalk conversational sort of like deal, right?
And I think that's the point, is that he was kind of saying like, if somebody probably wouldn't make a good facilitator if they were loaded, and if somebody wasn't doing their job as facilitator, then they might re-examine putting somebody else in there as a facilitator.
Well, yeah. Well, and it'd be, imagine like at a meeting we've seen so many times where like the chairperson like doesn't show up or some shit, right? Like if the facilitator didn't show up to that, like that'd be.
You'd want to have a second in command, and there's definitely been people chairing in both programs who have been fucking dildos, and.
What was your take on it, Daniella?
On the
meeting in general.
I thought it was fucking kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Do you want to expand on that, or?
Well, no shit. Yeah, I'll get there. Yeah, I guess I just had a bit of anxiety, I guess, because like I was sitting there listening, like seeing what's on the board as am I happy, and it's like, well, what the fuck does that have to do with recovery, you know? And that's kind of where I felt, is if I were to walk in my first day of being sober and being, sitting in a room full of strangers talking about am I fucking happy and what do I do to be happy, like, fucking cool, like what's gonna make me happy is to use, I wouldn't get recovery out of that, and I just felt a little anxious because I felt like I was hearing a lot more complaints than recovery based type.
Well, I think
conversation.
What's interesting about that too is, and it might be in like more well articulated on like the sheet that the guy gave you, but basically at the beginning he was saying that smart recovery is essentially like a supplement to recovery, not like the end all be all. Whereas like when we go to AANA, it's like and just the way people talk about it or present the program, it's like this is like the solution. Like some hardline AANA would even be like, like
this will fix any problem in your life.
This will fix everything. You don't really need outside help from like doctors and stuff like that. Just do this. Whereas I feel like this is more of like, if you're actively working towards recovery, like this is a good thing to supplement that. He said something around
that. It even says that on the sheet. Smart recovery is one tool. Others include doctors, counselors, treatment centers, other peer support groups, which is I'm assuming means NA meetings or AA meetings, family, friends, self-help books.
Yeah, I must have missed that. That must have been
that's when you were coming in. Yeah. So I think in terms of that, right? Like I totally agree. I don't think just going to a smart recovery meeting and like picking up like the books that the guy was talking about is gonna like change my life, because like for the most part, and I think this is not like a unique experience to myself, but in the early days, like I didn't pick up the fucking books. I didn't want to like read anything, you know what I mean? Like I was forced to in treatment, and I didn't pick that shit up for like another 6 months, you know what I mean? So I don't think judging it directly against AA or NA is like really fair, because I think it's totally different.
Yeah, I think there's a different different people are at different parts of their different depths of their addiction or something like that, and I don't, that's why they have treatment centers, and people are at a point where going to a meeting, or whether it be AA or NA or Smart Recovery, isn't cutting it because they're too far gone, or their life has become too insane and they're using it as too dramatic, then that's why they go to treatment centers. And I think that even goes into a topic that I kind of want to talk about, whereas like you have a certain level of militancy when you go to a treatment center. You have a certain level of militancy in a 12-step program to one degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
This is less militant in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like, to be honest, I felt like the people there, a lot of them were trying to become more conscious and were pretty positive. Like, I felt like the majority of people are trying to interact. Like, your boy here was probably the worst egg of the bunch.
Yeah.
Well, talk about people getting their head cut off. Yeah, that is a bit extreme.
So, well, I think that, let's have some context for that. So the topic of the Smart Recovery meeting was, "Are you happy?"
Am I happy?
And we talked. I think they were talking about.
Yeah, it was actually, am I happy?
Am I happy?
Words matter, Mike. I almost called you
True.
that.
Words kill, Josh.
Words matter, and you call him by the wrong
I know.
So we're brainstorming on happy definitions. So I put out there, I feel that when I'm doing stuff, getting my happiness is an inside job. And I think it said something like, it's better when I'm not doing a bunch of coke and my happiness relies on that. That seemed to fly. They didn't seem to say anything.
I got a little bit of a vibe.
Yeah, I got a bit of a vibe.
That
too.
definitely started the decline between me and the facilitator. But they didn't say, "Oh, we don't mention the specifics of drug use."
True.
Here, which they would at an AA or an NA meeting.
Yeah, but I got the same vibe. I got the vibe of like he like flagged you as a potential derailer of the meeting.
Defacilitator.
100%. 100%. I got that same kind of feeling. And it felt like it almost was just like everybody went really quiet. So like everybody was probably like, whoa, in their head.
Yeah.
That's kind of the
But I'm sure that the guy facilitating has seen that before, especially with AA and NA being such a big program here, and to what you were saying before, like the militarization of treatment, and then also like the AA and NA community here. Like I think Smart Recovery in like a bigger city where a lot more people are established individuals and are not like in Nanaimo particularly just to get clean, because like here we have so many people that are here to get clean and that's their focus on their life, right? Whereas like if you go to like a meeting in like Calgary or Vancouver or like Victoria even, like you have people that like have this full life that are also doing AA, whereas like here there's so many people that like AA is like almost one of their like central tenets of their identity, that like it bleeds into everything so much. And I think when we go in with like a lot of time in 12-step program, like, or anyone goes into a Smart Recovery thing with like a lot of time in like a smart or a 12-step program, they're obviously going to be doing what we're doing, which is like comparing the two and being critical of the other program as opposed to their own, right?
Yeah, I was trying to stray away from biases like that. I think the point that I was making essentially was that because it's strictly CBT based, they try and jump into that right from the get-go. And if everybody's in a place where they're open and receptive to that, if they're in that mind state, then it can be a positive meeting, right? And you want to stay on track. And it kind of is don't rock the boat too much and stay on point and don't say anything. Because that was the thing. We talked, and there was some old lady that mentioned like, oh, I find that like if I dwell on the problem, then things get worse. But if I can just find the solution, then it's fine. And I said something to the fact of, sometimes there are problems that are too big that all sounds good. It goes back to the idea of like, a nice little Facebook quote or a little, fucking saying or whatever, whether it's in a program or out of a quote book or a fucking book on Buddhism or whatever. That's all fine and dandy, but when you're in the middle of the shit, then quotes are only going to take you so far. Those kind of like witty sayings or sayings of wisdom are only worth they only have so much heretic value. And I think so. Then I think I said, well, yeah. I mean, what happens if you're? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what if, your child had just died, or what if you're suffering from gonorrhea and you didn't know that? That I think maybe got a couple laughs, but that definitely pushed Buddy's red flag radar a little more.
Your second strike.
That was strike 2 under the table, off the books.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I've done CBT before, so I kind of knew to expect that, right? And when I was doing it before, I was much more in the mindset of yourself, of like throwing a wrench into the situation and seeing what would happen. Like when I was in the psych ward and afterwards, like we were doing kind of a CBD.
Nice, doing a CBD therapy.
Yeah. No, at the time it was just THC and fucking CBD. But yeah,
far fucking out, man.
Doing the CBT, like in the past, I kind of knew what to expect from the facilitator when those sorts of things were brought up by you.
But here's the thing. What's interesting is that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is what Smart Recovery is based on. But if you really look at the 12 steps, and I was talking to a member, I don't know if you know John, from AA, really smart guy. I would love to get him on this podcast, but I don't think he's a little too shy or whatever. But essentially, 12-step programs, the actual 12 steps themselves, everything that's not a faith-based part of the 12-step program or a spirituality-based part is a cognitive behavioral therapy exercise. You know what I mean? That's riddled throughout the 12-step. I mean, just CBT is just thinking about the way that you think, thinking about your behaviors and examining your actions and your reactions to stuff. And so I don't think you can have some level of recovery at all without incorporating either consciously or unconsciously elements of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Well, and I think that's why the facilitator had issue with what you're saying, because like as a CBT sensei or whatever, like he was able to like kind of see the intention behind like some of the stuff he said.
Yeah, but I'm saying like for me it was like he basically said like, well, I don't like you, I don't appreciate you giving those extreme examples. But to that point, I would say like, well, what happens is, because this is supposed to work for anybody at any level. That's what you get the promise of when you go to a 12-step program, no matter where you're at.
To be fair, though, he did say no war stories, and you were getting a little dark.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't like drug war stories.
Well, no, but still, a war story is a war story, and what may not affect you could trigger something else in somebody else, right? Like, what if somebody fucking in their addiction saw somebody get their head cut off and you don't know, right? Like, that could have been a serious trigger. So that's probably why they're trying to stray that type of thing, Like, I'm not exactly for smart recovery. I probably fucking won't go back unless I want to trouble the shit out of them with you guys. So that sounds like a good time. But it felt, like, it definitely, I can see the point of it being kind of brought back so it's not too extreme, so it doesn't trigger.
Yeah, okay. That's fair. And I guess that's the point, is like cognitive behavioral therapy is not trauma counseling or anything like that. But that was what was interesting for me, was that, if you started bringing up stuff like that in a meeting, some people get outrageous in a meeting. You remember Donnie, you talking about that. I've definitely been a person who's been acting outrageously in a meeting and seen that somebody acting outrageously in a meeting. And it's interesting for me to see how the group just kind of like lets it slide and doesn't let it faze them. And I think that shows like the tolerance. Whereas I was continuing to get this kind of subtle shade from the facilitator, which I didn't really appreciate. And he felt like he was subtly like condescending to me. I would talk about like, he would say, well, what kind of things make you happy? I mentioned, well, gratification, whether it's delayed gratification, like working out, achieving your goals, or whether it's instant gratification. Sometimes you're in a bad mood, and I think I said, I'll have a cigarette, or I'll have some junk food or something. And he said something like, "Oh, I don't know why you would bring up gratification in a room full of addicts, like, or whatever." And I was like, "Well, dude, like that is."
Well, I think like, because I've been in your shoes in terms of like in similar sort of thing, like CBT, like I say, or like just even in like school and stuff, where I think once you've given that guy enough red flags, like he's gonna start thinking that everything you're saying is gonna be from some sort of like malicious or facetious point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he was just taking what you were saying with a grain of salt, saying like, okay, this guy's gonna try to turn this into, you know, well, when I fucking have a few fucking chocolate bars, I'm not thinking about cutting people's heads off, you know? It's like he didn't want it to like derail, right?
But I felt like that was kind of a common theme throughout the thing is like there was, and maybe it was, that's how it's supposed to go. It felt like people were a little bit indifferent. It felt like you weren't trying to relate to people. They didn't want to relate to situations that people might be in or anything like that. It was strictly on a cognitive, like frontal lobe type of level.
Well, I thought it was something that would give me great positive like reflection, like in the like if I was going to it all the time, I would be reflecting on a lot of the stuff being said there, and I think it's beneficial for certain personality types, like that's why I think I liked it. Like I'm like a conversational person, and like I could be in a meeting like that for like 6 hours and it'd be chill. Like I would like doing that, right? But some people like aren't going to vibe with that and want to hear like a direct like, this is how you're gonna do it. This is how you're gonna like stay clean. Like, you know what I mean? I'm more of like an AA thing. But like for me, I know I struggled a lot in early recovery, taking issue with things said in AA or things in the literature and taking issue with like the laws of the 12-step program kind of thing, right? And finding my ways around them and finding loopholes and being and like finding people I could even be critical about it with, right? Because there's so many hardliners that if I had known about Smart Recovery, well, I kind of knew about it, but if I'd been exposed to Smart Recovery early on, I think that would be beneficial for me in early recovery. But I don't think it being like an end all be all would be a possibility for most people, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like I went in with kind of like an attitude that it was gonna be like dumb, just because like as we were talking about in the car driving back, you know, like because of the fact that I got sober the way I got sober, it's kind of that's what I see as working. Just like how a lot of people in the 12-step programs who have gone to treatment talk about treatment, you know? And it just like that's what worked for me. So when I go into something new, I am going to be critical about it because I don't completely see the value in Smart Recovery. Like I don't see it as something that is really beneficial for me. And like I love conversations. I'm a conversationalist for sure, but I did have a bit of anxiety because I do tend to like pick up on a lot of like people's feelings and like and stuff like that, like empath, so to speak. But it was a lot for me, just like being around all those different moods, you know, and like a buddy being like, oh, well, I'm fucking pissed off, so I don't want to talk about it, and like other people being like ramped up, and I don't know, it was a lot for me to like kind of take in, right? But you know, what doesn't work for me does work for other people, right? So. Well,
and it helped that you almost got a standing ovation from the crowd.
Yeah,
for your
that did feel
share.
Good. that was a validation. Was that you that said validation?
I had suggested validation at one point as something that makes you happy.
Yeah.
And that's something we all deal with. And I think what they said was, well, you know, when I seek validation, it's nice to get a pat on the back, but when I seek validation from other people, there's something wrong with that. So it's interesting for me that they would say, oh, we don't give advice here, but time and time again, the facilitator was putting it to me like, it was almost a subtle way of being like, well, your thinking's not that great, and the problem is that you're just, too stupid to change your own thought patterns.
Well, what I mean, I tend to.
It was very patronizing.
I tend to agree though, and I believe that we in 12-step programs we'd have the same opinion about seeking outside validation as opposed to, like I think there's a difference between, like being happy and validated in your decisions within yourself, but seeking like outside validation of like, oh, like I have a nice house, or like I have like a nice car or something, or like. My boss gave me a promotion, or my boss gave me a raise because like I'm doing so well. It's something that, it's not in your control, but like to be focusing on that as like your worth as a person, or your worth as like someone in recovery, is kind of like problematic, I'd say, at least.
I guess the problem that I have is that, while I agree with that yeah, like officially, part of recovery is not trying to seek validation from other people. You're supposed to look at building your own self-esteem and getting validation through, acknowledging and actualizing your true self, and etc. But I think what bothered me was that part of, if he's saying other peer support groups, so this is a peer support group, part of being in a support group, I think, is being able to identify people and say, you know what, I acknowledge what you're going through, I acknowledge what you're saying, or whatever. Whether I'm somebody who's seeking validation and I'm talking about, well, I seek my validation in other people a lot of times, in my relationships with people at work, with people in romantic partners, or whether it's like, yeah, I seek gratification, sometimes that's what I need, or that's what I choose rather to use to get me out of a funk or whatever. That's how I still, even 2 years and change clean, I will still mood alter with sugar or TV or cigarettes or whatever. So I think the fact is that I feel like when you're supporting somebody, that's part of what you do, is you relate to them. You identify, oh, I've been there, I know what that's like. And that there's a therapeutic value in that. Whereas if you're just saying, well, your thinking's not right, that's not a good way to think, you should challenge the way that you're thinking, maybe that's more in line with their cognitive behavioral therapy line of thinking, but it just felt very indifferent. And it's essentially a subtle way of giving advice. And so you're constantly just judging what the other person's saying instead of just letting them be where they're at, or feel or just acknowledging their feelings. So they're basically saying like, well, your feelings are your feelings, but you're just, you're not thinking right, essentially.
Did you get that feeling as well, Daniella? Like that it was like he was being judged, or like that that people speaking were being judged, like in the room? Why?
I definitely felt it maybe towards him. I felt like there might have been a little bit of judgment for sure. But I do think it's just because of, the bit of trolling, right? I think I zoned out a little bit there, to be completely honest with you. Yeah. I'm a little tired today, so. Yeah. But I definitely think that there was a little bit of that. And I could sense something there. I just felt like it was like people had to be on, like I just felt like people were like trying, and like I was just sitting there rolling my eyes a lot, just like, fuck, man, and like the only thing that I could relate to was Buddy sitting next to me, who was talking about how he felt like he couldn't go to these places, and that's why I shared the way I shared, is because I was like, fuck, I was in your shoes, like, close, whatever, fucking 18 months ago. Even, less than that, really, like, even over a year, I was still wishing that I could be in those positions. I just went off in a completely different way there, but, yeah, I don't know. I zoned out a little bit.
No, it's fine. I think it was, I think like the whole point of it, like, makes sense to me. right? And I like that everyone was on. Like I like that it's a lot more engaging because like I sit through so many meetings where like you were saying, like you just zone out and you're just chilling and you're not really even paying attention, and then you're like, oh shit, like fucking this guy's been going on for 10 minutes or like whatever, or you're looking at your phone and they're like, Daniella, would you like to share? And you're like, oh, what's the topics, you know? And it's like
Fucking call people like that sometimes.
yeah. So I liked that. I liked how it was engaging like that, and I think, you know, it would be something to explore for some people, but I can definitely see why, like a lot of people, especially, you know, who have been predisposed to, like 12-step program, wouldn't really jive with it, right? Because it is a totally different format, and
I think it's so to that point, I would say like I'm not saying that there isn't any worth in this program, or that I think it would be good if you're like working on stuff and you want a couple of people to talk about, you're getting into the solution, you're in a good place, you want to talk about like, hey, this is things that I've been doing, CBT techniques, this is how I've been working on it, kind of troubleshoot maybe your things, and you're going in there to be constructive, and you're going in there to be positive and to have conversations about the solution, then it's totally beneficial. But what I'm kind of saying is like, so that requires you to be at a certain level in recovery and to have a certain level of recovery already in order for it to be beneficial. What was interesting also for me is like, I didn't think that there was parts where I'll admit that I was being a little outrageous. I was saying some outrageous things, and I was kind of being like, adversarial. Maybe not adversarial, but adversarial is a fair. That's a fair assessment. Okay, yeah. So but there was other times where I was saying, hey, like seeking validation, or I have troubles like not smoking and not giving into these obsessions where I'm not trolling. Like I'm just speaking of like what I'm struggling with, and instead of saying, well, I identify with that or whatever, they just kind of like wanted to essentially giving me advice whenever I bring something up like that. It was like, here's what you should be doing, this is what you're doing wrong. And that is, I mean, the standard in counseling, what we talked about last week with Rogerian therapy, is you don't do that. You don't just, I'm going to objectively tell you what your thinking pattern is wrong. You relate to people and you let them come to their own ideas about self-actualization and so forth. And that's where I got the sense of like the guy was essentially being condescending and being judgmental. And maybe that didn't help that I was, trolling and putting up these outrageous things at first, but
well, and I think one thing too, like that we take for granted, that I've just been kind of thinking about and trying to get to before was, I think one of the big things is we already have a lot of like CBT, like you're saying in the program, like in terms of just like how 12-step programs are set up and their format and the literature and stuff, but we take for granted here in Nanaimo at least, like how connected we are to other people in recovery, right? Like we have a really big community here. Most people that have very little time, all of their friends, all of their interactions are with people in recovery, right? And so I think, like I was saying before, right, like in an established like area where people are not necessarily devoting their whole lives to recovery, like going to that meeting, like maybe the only time all week that they even get any of that, right?
Okay, fair enough.
Whereas like I'm living in a sober house. I've been living in sober houses ever since I left treatment like 3 years ago. Like I have someone that like if I want to go home today and continue this conversation or just talk about my day and talk about my thinking and talk about my behavior, I have resources up to do that like till 5-6 in the morning every fucking day. Right? I can
You're fucking lucky.
You know what I mean?
And like living solo now, just fucking I could talk to my walls.
Yeah. Well, exactly, right? So I think if you have a full-time job, you have some kids or whatever, you're a grandmother or whatever, you have all this free time and you're living by yourself or you're living with a significant other of like an older mindset of just like, like fucking keep your head to the grindstone and just like keep on keeping on. It's like you might not have a space to just openly say like what you want to say or like to really look at why you're doing the things you're doing, right? So I think we do kind of take it for granted as like relatively young people in recovery. Daniella's getting up there in age, but
Fuck you.
but I think we do take it for granted, like our access to other like-minded people that we can bounce our shit off.
Well, I was almost thinking that what I take for granted is something that I find in having a support group of people and having the support group of 12-step fellowships is the therapeutic element of relating to people, hearing their experience and struggles. That seemed to be non-existent in the meeting. There didn't even seem to be any kind of element of fellowship at all. When people said, "Oh, I'm on day 2 right now of being clean and sober. I'm on day 1," which happened.
Yeah, you're
Nobody
like,
I went to go clap, and people were like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like,
yeah.
they're like, "Oh, we don't really care like where you're at, or you know what I mean? How hard you've struggled to get this one day clean."
May I interject? Because like I was honestly just thinking about that too. I was just like, what would I do if I fucking walked into Smart Recovery and they're like, we're all talking and was like, I want to fucking use, guys. Like, I feel like they would be like, well, like, I don't think that pertains to happiness, so, like, maybe we should keep it to the conversation. Like, what if I want to fucking go in there? I'm struggling. It's the only thing that I know because I don't like AA, like some of the people didn't jive with them or whatever, and I fucking want to use. I feel like I would leave there, knowing some shit about happiness, but I would still want to fucking use.
Yeah.
And that's if you didn't get vibed out of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I wanted to leave
angry
halfway
bro.
through, to be completely honest with you. I just stuck it out for the fucking podcast.
Like
Yeah.
fucking,
If I was by myself in there for just like being there to check it out, I would have left within fucking 10 minutes.
Well, I'm guessing that's the experience of Mad Bro in the corner who was fucking getting kind of snippy with you after the meeting. Like, I'm guessing that's kind of his experience because that's what it sounded like, at least. Like, he didn't seem like too upbeat or positive. He didn't really want to share too much, and he didn't really seem like he was doing too much.
All right, well, we can get into that. But so that was kind of my final thoughts on it. Is that I'm not totally writing it off. I don't think it's and then they say that it's not a be all and end all of recovery. It might be it's a small spoke in the wellness wheel, if you ask me. And in my opinion, if I was gonna do Smart Recovery and try and incorporate that, I'd rather just do work through a CBT workbook in my home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or shell them or go see to be honest, like going to the free counseling at Mental Health and Addictions was a lot more benefit. I found that to be a lot more beneficial.
Totally,
and if the price is the same,
too.
if I'm saying if I was in a position where, because here's the thing, I feel like the biggest draw for Smart Recovery is there's no talk about God, like, and I get that, because finding out that going to a 12-step program and finding out that you have to believe in God or some kind of higher power, that your recovery depends on that, is like finding out the person you're dating listens to Justin Bieber. It's a fucking it's a big turn off, and for a lot of
Justin Bieber, huh?
and it's a big turn off, and for a lot of people it's a fucking deal breaker.
No, I get it. I mean, as the avid believer in the room, like I do get that, and I do get that.
You big Justin fan?
It is a strain. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
baby, baby.
That's exactly the concert you're going to, eh?
Yeah, that's the concert I'm going to. That's why I didn't say which one it was. But I think it's all about what you put into it too, right? Like for me, I don't believe in God really. Like I don't subscribe to that, but I'm 4 years clean in a 12-step program. People are like, well, how does that work, right? And I think it's because of the amount of thought and the amount of time I put into the program, right? And thinking about like how am I going to make this program work for me without believing in God, right?
You don't have to believe in God, and it even says that, right?
Well, yeah, but like not really.
I mean, that's
you know what I mean. Like it's like you gotta have a higher power and like all this stuff, and for me, it's like I put a lot of thought into it, and I think a lot of people come from especially at the beginning, come from the thing of like, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in a higher power. This isn't gonna work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas like I came from it at like, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in a higher power. The solutions being presented to me don't seem logical. Like, what am I going to do about that, and what am I going to do to find something that works for me, right? And so I think you can apply that to anything, right? You can apply that to work. You can apply that to like this smart recovery thing. You can apply that to AA, NA. But I think our first human instinct a lot of the time, and for a lot of people, especially people like that are dealing with addiction, is to just say, oh, well, fuck it, this isn't gonna work, right? Mm-hmm. And then just have another excuse in the book of like why you're out there, you know, fucking 2-3 years after you fucking tried AA or tried NA or tried
smart recovery. Okay, right? Fair enough. And okay, so and that was, I think, that whole issue of like the hangups with the higher power, and that's a whole other podcast or two.
So let's not get biting my tongue right now.
Yeah, let's not get into that right now.
That I could say. Fuck.
So I just want to wrap that up with, okay, so after the meeting, people just kind of go their merry way. There wasn't like hanging out, or there wasn't trying to chat.
No type of fellowship.
Yeah, so I tried to. There was a guy in the meeting who was kind of shaking it rough, and so I started to chat him up a little bit after the meeting. These guys, Daniella and Josh, went to go get coffee or something, and you guys kind of took off to go back to my place. So I was talking with the guy, and I was explaining to him like, this is me trying it out. Like, I feel like the facilitator in there was vibing me out or whatever. And we ended up kind of getting into a bit of an argument that almost ended up getting physical. We were just having a heated argument, and I was getting defensive, and he was getting a little defensive or whatever. But at the end of it, we talked it out, and I see what he was saying. He was basically saying to me, like, I've been there. I can get a couple weeks here, I can get a couple weeks there. I've tried NA, I've tried AA, I've tried this stuff, and I've been coming for months now. He's like, I wonder if it's going to work. People tell me, like, oh, you're ready when you hit a bottom. I feel like my bottom's the fucking grave. But, what I've gotten out of this is that you have a choice. And that's presented to us across the board, right? Just like it is in 12-step programs. You don't have to use ever again if you don't want to, or if you're fully willing to follow this program to the best of your ability, or whatever the fuck. Like, the bottom line is you have a choice. You have a choice to look at your thinking and put work into your recovery, whatever that looks like, and you have a choice to indulge the obsession and act out on your obsession and compulsion and continue in addiction, or you have the choice to continue trying to get out of active addiction and into recovery. And to be honest, that was the realest part of the whole smart recovery process, was talking to this guy in a parking lot and getting heated, and then actually trying to relate to one another. That, for me, like, that was the best part of the whole recovery. Everything else felt indifferent and clinical, and I was, that's where I stand on it. If I was gonna do smart recovery, I'd rather just go through a CBT workbook in my room. And the CBT workbooks that I have were given to me when I was in active addiction, but up to my own, you know what I mean? It's just, it wasn't enough. Like, that's the problem, is that we do have choices, but people need help. I think that's even a point that they brought up in the meeting, is that you have to be able to ask for help. And so, it's just, I don't think there's very seldom just one aspect or one thing that you can do that's going to cure all of your problems and recover you in every area of your life. It's about, trying out new things and putting as many resources to work as you can get your hands on.
Yeah, well, I think, that speaks to, in the 12-step programs, you see guys that are super hardliners that are not healthy, like, in terms of, like, a lot of aspects of their life. Like, they might know it all, and they might be, really excelling in terms of their recovery and in terms of their time, but, like, certain aspects of their life are falling to shit, right? And so, I think, I think it, like I said at the beginning, it's a supplement to recovery, in my opinion. I think it's something that, for certain people would be interesting to get into, right? I think if you're more of like a solitary type of person, or you already put a lot of thought into your actions and stuff, like what you're saying, like doing a like workbook or something, or just doing one-on-one counseling would be probably more beneficial for you. But I really like just like having a conversation, throwing shit out there, and just like seeing like what sticks with someone, or what someone's gonna challenge you on, right? That does bring me a lot of insight, and it does bring me a lot of insight in the moment, but also reflecting on it. Like I could get super heated with someone, and like 2 weeks later, like kind of get what they're saying. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time we're too quick to dismiss that other person's view and like not actually pay attention to it enough to get like that insight that might not come for a long time, right? Like there's stuff that my dad said to me fucking 10 years ago that like I've just started to understand. You know what I mean?
Clean your room.
And stuff like that.
Oh my god, yes, it's true. It's true.
Clean your room.
To that. Yeah, no, I actually told my dad recently that how fucking grateful I was that he would like make me do everything properly, because I see the value in it now. So like I get what you're saying, like those things they don't always come about.
Yeah, I think it's what you make of it, for sure. Just like anything.
Yeah.
100%. I gotta take this.
Okay. Well, yeah, like I had to have a conversation with my dad about this sort of thing like recently about like I brought up some stuff that he'd said to me back in the day, and he was surprised that I even remembered it, right? And it's like, well, it's because I do put a lot of thought into my decisions. Like when I told him I was not going to go to school anymore and drop out of school this semester, right? And we had a long talk about it, and it was interesting because in my head I've had my dad built up as this kind of caricature of like negative experience I've had with him,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like who he is today. But because I hadn't voiced that to him before, like my brain was always going back to like, oh, like dad's gonna be so mad when I tell him I dropped out of school, like dad's gonna be like this, that, whatever. And like because I was just open and honest and had a conversation and told him where I'm coming from, like I felt like it was one of the best conversations I've had with him in fucking years, right? And that's crazy to me because in my head that was gonna be the worst thing I could possibly say to him, right? Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm trying to say is it all comes back around in terms of like you get what you put in,
mm-hmm.
but like also you have to be willing to like put it out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
True that.
So Mike is looking a little antsy, and Daniella's falling asleep in the chair next to me here. So
I'm so tired.
we just wanted to keep this one short. We will be coming back with a longer format like in the future with other guests and stuff. So yeah, if you guys wanted to come onto the podcast as a guest, you got questions or anything like that, make sure that you guys send us an email or hit us up on Facebook and Instagram. Our email is highlyaddictivepodcast@gmail.com. Also sponsorships, we're looking at you, Cimatech, hit us up at that email as well. And pretty much keep listening, guys. We really appreciate the support. We're on our way to 200 likes and follows at this point, so that's pretty awesome.
Crazy.
Yeah, we're blowing up pretty big on the on SoundCloud, and we are really working towards getting like a video format and just some better mics here for you guys, because
we need that Skrilla.
Yeah. other than that, everyone wish Daniella a happy birthday. It's her birthday.
Tomorrow.
Thank God. I was like, do not do that.
Well, by the time it's out, she's already, it's
You're
already
gonna be
past her
fucking
birthday.
30,
yeah. But yeah, do you guys have anything else you want to say at the end here?
No, I think that really covers it. I'm stoked to be back, but I think it's good to even just like if you have ideas of topics and stuff, to also message them the topic ideas, right? Because it's always good to have more things to chat about. So.
Absolutely.
Oh, and if you particularly yourself don't want to come on, but you know someone that would be like super down, like share it with them and get us in touch with them, right? Like if you're like, oh, I'd love to hear Bob on there, like he's fucking sick. Get us in touch with Bob. We'd love to have him on.
Yeah, we'll put Bob on.
Hell yeah.
We love Bob.
Yeah, Bob's the best. All right, guys. Thanks again for listening to the Highly Addictive podcast, and we'll be back next Monday.